Welcome back to my channel and the very last video in the nailmas series. This is my last Christmas set. These are sugarplum fairy inspired polygel nails that I did, so I will be showing you how to do these step by step: prep, application, shaping, and nail art. So if you're interested in seeing that, please stay tuned. All products will be in the description, and I have a lot of other polygel and press-on nail tutorials on my page as well. So we are starting off with nail prep. Good nail prep is the foundation for any good long-lasting set. I think all of these steps are very important, but of course, nail prep sets a really great foundation for good retention. So we're gonna start by pushing back the cuticle gently. Take your time with this step, go slowly, but be thorough, and of course be gentle. Don't hurt yourself, don't use excessive force. I like to use the scraper tool on the other side to remove anything that I've kind of lifted up. Very gently again, we're not digging into the nail or anything like that, using a very light touch. And you can see here, I'm trying to make sure I don't skip the corners, that, you know, I'm making sure I'm pushing back the cuticle thoroughly across the entire nail. But just want to repeat over and over, like, don't hurt yourself, don't use excessive force. Just go very gently, bit by bit, and be thorough. Now I'm taking my Melody CZE file. In that last clip, I was just showing how the file goes up to like 30 RPMs. It shows you the speed and it has a forward and reverse function, so I would highly recommend it. Really affordable, great e-file from Amazon that I've been using for a few years. I will have it linked below. But anyways, we are taking a 240 grit, very fine grit sanding band from Pana and just running that along the cuticle once more and across the entire nail to remove that shine, using a very light touch here and a very low speed, about 3 RPMs. And if you'd like to shorten your natural nails before we apply tips, you can do that. I like my natural nails short, so I'm just taking a hand file and filing them down a little bit before we apply any tips. And we are going to do a tapered square nail set today. I just love a good tapered square or square set, one of my favorite nail shapes, and I feel like I am a lot more comfortable and faster when it comes to doing square nail sets, when it comes to application and shaping. So I love doing tutorials with this shape. So we are using these nail tips from the dabouijebar, and we are just making sure they fit sidewall to sidewall. If they are too big, they will likely pop off, and same thing with if they are too small. If you have to force them onto the nail plate, they are too small and will likely just pop right off. So take your time sizing out the nail tips. I actually like to kind of write down in like the notes in my phone or on a piece of paper, whatever you prefer, the sizes that you use, so that next time you go in, you don't have to keep sizing them out. And in that last clip, I was just dehydrating and cleansing with some Young Nails Swipe, just so we have a nice clean surface. And now we're gonna take some Young Nails brush on glue and glue on our tips, just putting a drop at the center and then holding it down for 10 seconds here. And I love the brush on glue. I think it's so much easier than the nail glue that you squeeze out of a tube. So you can see here, this is like in real time. I hold it down for about 10 seconds. You can also do it from the other end here. You can also kind of like put pressure on the sides just to make sure that the entire nail tip is glued on. And yeah, so just repeating that here, drop at the center, just kind of feathering it out. You don't want to use too much glue, that's not helpful either. And then just holding it down, trying to make sure everything is straight. And usually for like 10 seconds, once you hold it down for 10 seconds with some pressure, it will stay pretty well. But just for extra caution, you can definitely like hold down the sides or apply some pressure from the other side, and they should be good to go. Brush on glue is just so much easier to use and a lot more cleaner, so I would highly recommend it. I'm going to cut a little bit of length off, so I'm gonna use the tip cutter and attach some mini magnets. You can put as many magnets as you'd like, depending on the length that you would like to have, and it's so easy. Once you just kind of, the magnets stick to the tip cutter, you can just go ahead and cut all of your nail tips and they will be the same length. This hack is super helpful so that you don't have to like measure out and compare each nail. They will all be the same length basically. Now we're just taking that same fine grit sanding band and blending the nail tip with the natural nail. We are not filing on the natural nail, we are only filing on the tip, and you don't need to do too much, just a little bit to kind of help flush out that area a little bit more. And then I do remove the shine from the rest of the nail tip. I do feel like this helps retention, just running it over that nail tip and creating a roughed up surface so that the polygel has something to stick to. Once we clean off that dust, we are gonna apply 1 coat of Young Nails Protein Bond. This is a primer. This is also really great for retention. Basically creates a anchor for your gel base coat and your polygel to stick to. So I would definitely recommend checking that out as well. Once that air dries, we're going to apply a gel base coat. You can use any one that you'd like. I'm using Madam Glam. Just make sure you get a thorough, even layer, and make sure you fully cure it as well, and do not wipe off the sticky layer. This is a common question I often get, like on my TikTok, where I post a lot of polygel videos, and you want to make sure that you cure the base gel fully and don't like wipe it with alcohol or acetone or anything. You want to make sure that it stays sticky, but you definitely want to make sure that it's fully cured as well in your lamp. Now we are taking our Dappen dish and some 70% isopropyl alcohol. Sometimes they store them in like these pump dispenser bottles, and I'll just pour it from there. Love these from Amazon, super easy to use, great for acetone as well. We're just putting a little bit in a Dappen dish. And this is the polygel we will be using, Macart Le Corail. So I'm just gonna take my Kaz Kolinsky brush and just kind of work some liquid into there before we get started. This is kind of like my technique when it comes to draining out the liquid. I have other videos on my page that go into more depth on this. And also all of these products, the Dappen dish, the brush, everything is on my Amazon storefront. Everything will be in the description. And I do have like a polygel essentials list as well, and everything will be on there. So the slip solution basically helps us mold the polygel. So you just want a little bit on your brush, and once you place a bead down, you want to start patting everything out and then dragging. It's important to pat first. You want to pat, pat, pat. And then once you've kind of evened and spread out the product a little bit, you can start dragging. Obviously, sometimes it's a combination of both methods. But if you start dragging as soon as you place it down, it's probably not going to give you a nice, even application. So this is where patting is really important, because it's just kind of pressing down the product, helping it kind of, you know, go where you want it to, but, you know, adding some structure and strength as well. Because if you just only drag, you know, most of your product is gonna come off, and, you know, you do wanna start building up the nail. These nails are, you know, fairly long, so you don't want your application to be too thin either. I like to work in small beads. That's just how I personally do it. It helps ensure that everything is fully cured and that I really have control over how I'm building up the strength and structure of my nail. So I always start with a small bead on the free edge like I'm doing here. You can see like I'm patting and dragging, and then I will drag off the excess product. And definitely I will go back and just remove any excess product from the sidewalls, just so the nail doesn't get too bulky. Once that's fully cured, we place our next bead, and this bead is usually a little bit bigger, but we start to work that up towards the cuticle, you know, building some of that structure in the center of the nail, starting to build a little bit of our apex, and then bringing that down the free edge. And I know I'm not showing the liquid in this clip per se, but this is where the 70% isopropyl alcohol, you know, whatever slip solution you're using is really important, because you want to make sure that your brush is, you know, damp enough, but not like too much liquid on there, that you have enough on there to help you kind of move the polygel around, and that it's, you know, not sticking to your brush too much, because polygel can be very sticky. So just moving on to the next bead here, and you can see I'm mostly patting. And once it's kind of in position, that's when I start to drag. And then like at this point, I'm mostly dragging it down the rest of the free edge. So just experiment with your techniques. It's just really about getting comfortable with your brush and kind of the different motions you have to use. So just see what works best, and it's gonna be different depending on the type of length of nail you're doing or the shape. And then dragging off the excess product is always helpful, so you don't have to do too much shaping in that area at the end. So again, with our second bead, we're just patting, and because we're patting, most of that product will stay in that area, because we do want most of our strength in the apex. And then once that's kind of to my liking, just drag the rest of it down. And like I mentioned, if you feel like your polygel's getting too sticky, dip it in your rubbing alcohol, your 70% isopropyl alcohol, and that should help kind of maneuver the polygel a little bit more. And then our third and final bead is basically the cuticle bead. So this is gonna be mostly concentrated on the cuticle area. So you wanna place the bead below the cuticle area and work it up towards that, tucking it into it as flush and as evenly as possible. So you can see I'm really using the edges of my brush here versus the body of my brush. Using the edges really just helps me tuck it into those corners. And once I feel like the cuticle area is kind of, where I want it to be, I will go ahead and drag down the rest of the product and then remove any excess at the bottom. So you can see again here, placing that cuticle bead below the cuticle, starting to pat it and work it towards the cuticle bit by bit. And as we get closer, we're gonna really start using the edges of our brush and just turning left to right as needed. So turning to the left here to tuck it into that area. And we're really just focusing on the edges of the product, right? We don't wanna flood the cuticle area. We don't want excess product in that area. So really just inching it in there bit by bit. And then again, once it's to your liking, you can go ahead and start dragging the rest of the product down, which is what we're doing here. This is another reason I work in small layers, because if I see like there's a little bit of area that's kind of shallow, needs more product, I can go back and add that, of course, once everything is cured. So I felt like I needed to add a little bit more at the free edge, so I just went and did that. And then you can always like reverse brush, kind of blend it in that way if you need to as well. You don't have to use your brush just in one direction. So let's work on our next cuticle bead here, using the edges of our brush and just working on the very outer edges of that product, tucking it into the cuticle area. And I did want to mention this color Polygel, the Le Corail, is pretty sheer. So if you're looking for a more pigmented pink, this probably is not the one unless you're doing a really thick application. I'm trying to do a thinner application here, just try to use what I need for the most part, try to cut down on filing time if I can, but this is definitely a more sheer pink. I personally don't think it's an issue, I think depending what kind of design you're doing, but I'm planning to add gel polish and nail art later, so I think it's fine, but this is definitely not the most pigmented pink in my opinion. But anyways, we're gonna keep working on that cuticle bead, and I feel like I repeat myself a lot in these videos, but I just like to give a detail, excruciating detail in terms of what works for me and what I'm doing as I do it in the video. But if you guys prefer for me to talk less and just let music play, I can definitely do that. But I know when I was a beginner, it really helped me to have more detail rather than less. So that's our application, not looking too shabby. The 3 bead method usually works pretty well for me when I'm doing square nails of this length. Once you fully cure, there will be a sticky layer, so you can use some young nail swipe to remove that. So let's jump into shaping, and I'll quickly go over the type of equipment that I use. So definitely a dust collector. This is the Young Nails one. You can use whatever brand you'd like. I mean, as long as it has good suction and a filter, and noise levels vary, so see what you like. But I've been using this one for a couple of years, and I just change out the filter. Also trying to make a habit of wearing some sort of protective eyewear, so I got these off Amazon, and then I'm using an N95 mask in this video. So we're gonna start off with a 5-in-1 drill bit. This is a fine grit one. You can get these from Pana on Amazon. And this originally started out as an experiment, cleaning up the cuticle area, sealing the cuticle. I started experimenting with doing that first in my routine a while back, and now it's I don't even think twice. This is always gonna be the first step I do. Just cleaning up the cuticle area just really helps me see and kind of visualize where I need to shape and where I don't need to. So anyways, the reason I use a fine grit one is because you don't want to apply a lot of pressure in the cuticle area. I mean, you don't want to dig in there. You just want to work at it bit by bit and kind of refine it and clean it up as needed. And also polygel is a lot thinner than acrylic, so you don't want to file away too much of this area like I'm showing here. You want to keep that square shape as much as possible. If you remove too much from the cuticle area, like I'm pointing to there, your shape is going to look off. So anyways, Sorry, I meant to say polygel is softer than acrylic, and that doesn't mean that it's not as strong. Thinner is not the right word, but it just takes less to file it because it's obviously a hybrid gel and it has gel in it. So I always start off with the 5-in-1 drill bit, and I go over the cuticle area, and that drill bit works really well for that. The next thing I do is I take this round pana bit. This is a lot more coarse. We're not using this to seal the cuticle necessarily. We're just using it to go over the surface of the nail. This will kind of help even out any areas that are bumpy or uneven. You know, you can use it to taper in the sides a little bit if you like. And I do run it over the cuticle area just to smooth it out, but not necessarily like seal it or use it in the same way I would with the 5-in-1 bit, obviously because the shapes are different, right? And then this bit is also really great for cleaning under the nail if there's any excess product. This is where I use this bit, and I just run it under the nail and it will remove it very easily. This bit is also great for thinning out the C-curve and just kind of thinning out the free edge as needed because the round shape really helps with that. Now we are going to move on to hand filing. We're going to use an 80/80 grit hand file, and this part is always where I start to see the shape really come together. So I just season the edges because this file can be quite coarse. And the first thing I do is I always run it under the sidewall. This just helps remove any product that may be creating a bulky appearance or just creating like unevenness on the sides, just so everything is nice and even and straight like I'm pointing to there. When you're getting closer to where like the natural nail is and the nail tip is that we glued on, just try to keep your file straight and don't use too much pressure, because one mistake I always made as a beginner is I would file too much in that area and it would create like an uneven notch. So just try to be mindful of that. So once we run the file under all of the nails, we're gonna start filing against the sidewall rather than under it. This also just kind of helps straighten things out a little bit, but one thing is to not file into the corner too much. If you're like me and you like a sharp, crisp square, you don't want to file into the corner because it's just going to create like a notch. It's going to taper it in and you're going to lose that really nice sharp corner that helps define a square. Like, just think of what like a square shape looks like in like the 4 sharp corners. And so anyways, I just try to stay away from that corner as much as I can. And that's really helped me kind of get a nice crisp square shape. And then you can run it along the free edge just to kind of clean up that area and make it a little bit more crisp. Get that kind of really nice square finish at the free edge. And then we're gonna go ahead and repeat the steps on the other nails. Filing against the sidewall, making sure everything is nice and straight and trying to avoid that corner, not put too much pressure as we get closer to it. I always end up like rotating the way that I file, like the way that I'm holding the hand file. You know, filing your own nails is not like super comfortable, so you have to use like weird positions, especially when you're filming. So I always end up like kind of going back and forth, but I just try to keep my file as straight as possible. Now we are going to run the file over the surface of the nail. I'm not using a ton of pressure here because the pana bit, the round pana bit that we used, did a lot of the work for us, but we just want to make sure we hit all parts of the nail when we do go over the surface, just to make sure everything is nice and even. So I basically just run this over the surface of the entire nail. Again, just kind of switching my positioning here and making sure I file over all parts so everything is nice and even. And this again is like where everything really starts to come together and the nail starts to feel like it's getting to that really like nice square shape and that the surface is pretty even with no bumps or anything like that. And then to like get that like really nice square finish, I actually file the free edge this way as well, and I pull my file away, because when you pull away it kind of helps make sure that you're not filing into the corner too much. It's really easy to just like file into the corner and take off one side more than the other, so I literally pull my file away so that I avoid doing that. And then you go ahead and repeat that on the rest of the nails. And the very last step, you can either use a buffer. I just like to use the very fine grit sanding band because we've been using it throughout this nail set anyways, and I just have more control with an e-file. I just run that over the surface of the nail. I mean, this is just to like really ensure everything is nice and smoothed out, because although an 80/80 grit hand file is really great for like getting any unevenness out of the nail, it's also quite coarse. So if there are, any areas that, your nail's gonna feel kind of like grainy after you do that, but it will feel like and look more even. But the fine grit sanding band or a buffer will give you like that really smooth, like final finish, if that makes sense, before you go in for gel polish application. Anyways, shaping routines are difficult, but just experiment and see what works best for you. So we're gonna dehydrate and cleanse once more before we go in for nail art. And I wanna do a pink and purple sugar plum fairy set. And I just thought this would be a really funny shot to show because I have so many colors that I was like choosing between that I literally pulled every purplish pink color I had in my drawer, and I wanted to like see what to use. So I just thought it'd be funny to show you how many options I was looking at because it can be so hard to choose. Anyways, we're gonna start off with these three colors. We're using Pink with Benefits, Pinky Promise, and Pink Liberty. So I will show some inspo pictures once we get closer to actually drawing. But before we do that, I wanted to create a kind of blooming gel marble background with some of these colors that I have on my palette. So I'm taking a layer of Mia Secret blooming gel, leaving that uncured. So of course that it can bloom the colors. And then I'm taking some dotting tools and I'm basically applying dots of those colors on my palette, just one by one, and making sure that they are spread out. You'll see that the colors are already starting to bloom, and this is fine. I feel like I really got experimental and went out of my comfort zone with this set because I just wanted to like do something a little bit more different, use more colors, add in like different elements. So I wanted to start out with like an interesting background. So anyways, once everything is a little bit more bloomed, I took a little bit of white gel polish and started mixing the colors together, and I really like how it turned out. And then I just used an ombre brush to kind of feather that a little bit upward. Then I was like, okay, I want to add some glitter in, but not like a ton of glitter, just like a little bit of sparkle in the background. For some reason, I couldn't find a glitter gel polish to use, but I was like, that's fine. Let's just apply a layer of top coat and just start feathering that glitter in, just putting in bits and pieces. I'm not trying to like do a ton here, just like add a little bit of sparkle throughout the nail. So I did that and cured it and then applied a little bit of top coat just to seal that in so that it doesn't kind of mix in with the nail art. And here's all the different inspo pictures I was looking at on Pinterest just to get a sense of like the colors I wanted to use, some of the things I wanted to draw. So we're gonna start off with the white liner gel, and we are gonna start with the Sugar Plum Fairy's dress. I felt like this was the easiest piece to draw first because it's basically just a bunch of curved lines and ruffles, and you just wanna make it look as full as possible. The second part, which is her legs and her ballet shoes, I basically started sketching everything out, like kind of roughly where her shoes would go. And then like the reference picture I had, one of her legs was kind of up and angled. So I'm just trying to like draw the rough outline of that. And now we're just doing the head, roughly just drawing like a circle and then the outline of her nose and everything. This is basically like a silhouette more or less that we're drawing at this point, and then where her hair would be. And then her arms. So basically her arms, I tried to draw them very high up, and when it came to the hands, I was like, I'm not gonna draw every finger, that's just too complicated, but we are just gonna do a rough outline. And this is why I like sketching in white gel or whatever color you'd like. It just kind of helps you visually map out, like, especially for more complicated nail art, like where everything goes, and it doesn't have to be perfect yet. Then you can go ahead and fill that outline in with white. And once you go back and add color, that's where it kind of really starts to come together. And of course I had to draw some wings, so that was fairly simple, just like kind of a half rounded triangle on the left side here. So yeah, if you're kind of struggling with like nail art, that's more complicated, sketching it out and kind of outlining definitely helps kind of break it down into, more simple pieces. And once that's done, we start color blocking, and that's where things really start to come together. So I'm gonna use Perfect Pink for her dress and just fill in that white outline and maybe kind of define and carve out those kind of curved lines where the ruffles were in her dress a little bit more. Then I'm gonna take Purity from Madame Glam, which is a really kind of milky white, and mix that with which color was that? Pink Liberty. And we're gonna create a little bit of a translucent pinkish purple color, and I'm gonna use that on the fairy wings and just apply a layer of that and then fully cure it. And I decided to use that same color for her ballet shoes as well. And then we're gonna use that kind of more pinkish tan color to fill in her arms and legs and the head area. This was very much outside of my comfort zone. Like, I wasn't sure how I was gonna draw a ballerina, so I just did the best I could, and I felt inspired to do this type of set. So I feel like when you're feeling inspired and motivated, that is the time to like act upon it and like sit down and do the set, or else you might just start overthinking it and not do it at all. And I didn't want to make it too complicated, so I'm not going to add any more to the head area, just kind of like leave it in that color. But I did add some more white to her dress just to kind of outline the ruffles and add a little bit of highlight. And that was it for the ballerina. Now we're just going to do a really large pink ribbon. So I'm using that perfect pink color and just drawing the two sides of the ribbon, basically 2 circles, just sketching it out and then going back and adding more depth. Talking in these videos for more than 30 minutes always becomes really difficult. And then we're just doing the ends of the ribbon, just trying to make sure they're all nice and curved, and then going back and adding a little bit of white gel polish just to add a little bit of highlight and dimension. Now we are going to use this variety pack from Amazon of these pearls and take some Macart rhinestone glue and put just literally 1 pearl in the center. I'm just using these tweezers to grab it and then just kind of spread the glue around just to make sure it's nice and secure before we just place it right at the center and cure it. And we're going to be using Koopa top coat for all the nails. So this is my favorite gel top coat at the moment. So I'm just applying it around the ribbon and the pearl and then curing that in my lamp. And I forgot to mention that kind of marble blooming gel background I did on the ballerina nail. I ended up repeating it on all the nails. I like how it turned out. I just didn't want to bore you guys with showing that again. And we're going to try to draw these sugar plums and then do this kind of design with the pearls on the ring finger. So I'm taking a dotting tool. I didn't want to do purple. I wanted to stick with kind of the pink theme. I thought I was going to add more purple in this set, but I didn't end up doing that. So anyways, I'm taking a dotting tool and I'm just drawing kind of 3 circles at the top and then 2 circles at the bottom. Using a dotting tool is just like so much easier for this versus a brush, so I would definitely recommend that. Taking some white gel polish and we're just kind of making these small dots just to kind of make that kind of snow effect that we saw in the reference photo and add a little bit of texture, make them look a little bit more 3D. So literally just moving my brush very quickly, making these very little small dots, and you don't need a lot of product on your brush to do this. And if you want to get more fancy, you can take some black shading gel from Nails by Dev or another translucent jelly black color. You could also mix black gel polish and clear, and we're just going to add the tiniest amount around the edges of the sugar plums. This once again just like helps make it look a little bit more 3D, gives it a little bit more dimension so they don't just look like flat circles. I decided, well, I didn't do purple for the sugar plums, but I don't really want to do green for the leaves. But I think purple would match a lot better than green, so I ended up using purple to draw the leaves, which turned out fine. But I'm just drawing these kind of long triangles at the top and on the sides of the sugar plums. You know, they are kind of covering them a little bit. These don't need to be perfect, just draw like maybe 1 or 2 kind of on the edges, make them like a somewhat triangle shape, and then I added like a little bit of white at the center just to make it, you know, have a little bit more dimension and, you know, make it look a little bit more interesting. And then I repeated that at the bottom. I drew this one at the top of the sugar plum, and then I drew like one more triangle on the side, just so they kind of look like leaves, even though they're not green. Now this part was definitely a lot more time consuming, but I basically took some McCart rhinestone glue, put a little bit on my nail art palette, and then picked some up with my brush and kind of drew the outline of where I wanted the pearls to be, like we saw in that reference image. Now I'm placing them one by one. This was definitely time consuming, like I mentioned, but I'm using different sizes, and basically you just want to like place them in the outline that you drew. I did kind of like a loop, just kind of making it look like, you know, the pearls are kind of like in a looped curved line, whatever you want to call it. You can see it here. So basically just place the pearls one by one in that formation or whatever pattern you want to do, and then you can fully cure once they're all in place. Now we're gonna do like a ribbon lace nail design on the thumb. So I'm drawing these really thick white lines with my white liner gel, and they basically zigzag and go from corner to corner. So you can see here once I finish this one. And I did make these pretty thick as well, though you could do them thinner if you'd like. I'm basically gonna go ahead and repeat that, you know, basically zigzagging across to the bottom of the nail. And then you're just gonna start drawing these really small circles. Don't overthink this because you don't have to worry about them being perfect or uniform. You basically just wanna make sure they're more or less small circles, and that more importantly, they're connected. So I basically just went ahead and repeated that all along the nail, and by the end, it basically starts to look like ribbon/lace. And the very last nail that we're gonna do is the pinky. We're just gonna do some really simple miniature candy canes with the dotting tool. I'm just drawing the basic outline with some gel polish, and then I went back and added some pink dots spaced out along that, and they looked like mini candy canes at the end. And once that's fully cured, we top coated it with the gel top coat from Koopa. So 30 minutes later, that is the end of the tutorial. So thank you for watching. This was definitely a long one, but I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it helped out. Whether it was with polygel application, shaping, prep, or nail art, I had a lot of fun doing this nail set. It was very experimental for me and a little bit outside of my comfort zone. It is my last Christmas nail set, but we will be doing a New Year's set, so please stay tuned for that. And I will see you in my next video.